Welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Bill Rader, and joining me in my podcast, podcast bubble is my co-host, Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on today? How you doing?
Billy Raids, how you doing, buddy?
I'm excited. We got a big guest.
Huge guest.
Yeah.
Larry McShane from New York Daily News. He wrote the book Little Vic and the Great Mafia War, and this is a huge guest, Bill. Pleasure to have him on. It was a tremendous conversation. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. The only thing, the only bad part about it is that he couldn't get on. He couldn't fix his camera. We spent about 15 minutes with him at least, right? Trying to help him.
Yeah, and we've had that problem with guests before, Billy.
Yeah.
It's hopefully next time we have him on, because he's going to come back.
Yeah.
He'll get that fixed, but we worked it out. He's just audio, and people have to look at me and you still, but at least But anyway, Bill, the one thing that I want to clear up is we're going to be talking about. He dropped a lot of information in this, and one of the things is he's talking about Little Vic Orena and the Columbo family, and he said that I think it was Little Vic's sons, one of his sons, told him that John Gotti had carried an order to Little Vic to kill Jimmy Burke. Now, Jimmy Burke is a powerhouse we know, made famous in Goodfellas by Robert De Niro.
Yeah, Jimmy the Gent.
Jimmy the Gent. So we were trying to come up with the dates on there when that could have happened, because, of course, the whole thing surrounded around Billy Batts, who was Frank Vincent's character in the movie, who was killed by Jimmy Burke, and Tommy DeSimone, who was played by Joe Pesci. So after the episode, I looked into it more, and he was killed in 1970. So Carlo Gambino was the boss of the Gambinos. So he would have had to give that order. John Gotti wasn't even made. John Gotti wasn't made till 76, I believe, when he came out of prison.
Yeah.
So he was just an associate at that time. If he's carrying that order, and it had to come from Carlo Gambino, and he was known to be treacherous like that. But the interesting thing, Bill, is it never happened. So either two things had to happen. Either Carlo realized, I got to rescind this and call this off, because Jimmy Burke is a powerhouse. He's an earner. He's a killer. I mean, he's well respected across the boards at a commission in New York. Or the other four families heard about it and went to Carlo and said, "You can't do this. You need a commission. We need a full commission approval to take out somebody as powerful as Jimmy Burke," because he was a powerhouse, Billy. And again, when it comes to these guys, it always comes down to money. And he's such a big earner, that it would have had to come from the full commission. So that's what I think happened. Gambino probably ordered it originally, and then he either called it off, or the commission, outvoted him.
Right. And of course, we don't get into all of that with Larry, but quite a bit. We talk about Vic Orena and who was the other? I can't remember who the other guy was that we talked quite a bit about with him.
We talked about Apples McIntosh. We talked about the FBI scandal, the whole FBI scandal.
Right, that's right.
Was around the Grim Reaper.
Yeah,
and that whole thing. So we talked a lot about that.
Yeah. I mean, this was a great episode from start to finish. So just enjoy it. And if you have any questions or comments or anything for Larry, we're definitely going to have him back on. So if you watch this episode and there's anything that you want us to ask him for next time or talk about with him for next time, put it in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe and all of that stuff too, because
and Phil, you could get Larry's book on our bookshop. You could put a link right there where people could order it.
Yeah.
I got the book. It's fantastic. I also put Larry's other books up there. He's got one on the Philly mob, and he's got another one on The Oddfather of Vincent the Chin Gigante.
Right. That's
so
right.
All three of Larry's books are up on our bookshop.
So make sure you pick up a copy. One of each would be good.
Absolutely, Billy. Absolutely. But this episode focuses on the Little Vic book.
All right. right, Sean, without further ado, let's get to, well, first let's get to one of our great sponsors. And then after that, when we come back, we'll be with Larry McShane.
Enjoy, everybody.
Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
All right, Larry McShane, welcome to That's Enough Out of You. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you guys for having me. Great to be here.
Thanks for coming on, Larry. If you want to just give a quick bio of yourself and talk about, your work at the Associated Press and New York Daily News, and then we'll get into the Little Vic book.
Yeah, sure. I recently retired after 43 years of working in New York with the Associated Press at first, and I popped over to the Daily News, and I started covering crime in the city back in 1980 by the Paul Castellano execution outside Spark Steakhouse.
Right.
I was working a night shift, and I got sent over there, and me and another reporter were the first two guys at the scene. And so, that was kind of my introduction to organized crime. And, that was a time when things were changing a lot, right? Old guard, new guard, Gotti, Gigante was around, and then eventually the collapse of everything to some degree. So I was around for a lot of it and got to see a lot of it.
Yeah, we actually, Larry, we did an episode on the whole the Paul Castellano murder. The title of it was, Sean, the title of it was that's no diplomat, right? Because he had diplomat plates, isn't that what it was?
No, John Miller, I think it was John Miller, Larry, that said he was told when he first went down to the scene that it looked like a diplomat was assassinated.
Oh, that's right.
And when he took a look at him, he seen him on the ground. He said, "That's no diplomat. That's Paul Castellano."
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was one of the first reporters on the scene, as I said, back in the days where I could run 5 blocks through Manhattan. And it was just surreal because, the bodyguards hanging out of one door, Castellanos hanging out of the other door. It's not like they were celebrities, really. So people aren't gawking other than to gawk at these two dead guys.
Right.
But then once the FBI got there, I think everybody was kind of figuring out, oh, this is something more than I thought it was, and yeah, it was crazy. It was just a week or two before Christmas.
Right. Damn, there. It's amazing nobody got hit with anything.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it shows you these guys knew what they were doing, right? They had, on the face of it, it sounds insane, right? We're going to go up and kill the head of the family in the middle of East 45th Street a week before Christmas. Like, how's this going to work, And it did.
Crazy. So, Larry, let's get into the book. Your great book, Little Vic and the Great Mafia War. I read the book. It's really fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Really enjoyed it. But let's talk about what was the reason that you wrote the book, Larry? And focused.
I'll give you the short version of a long story.
Okay.
After I finished the Gigante book, I did another book about this mob guy from Philadelphia. And then
was that Natali?
Yes, Ralphie. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And then I got approached by somebody who knew Vic Orena's 2 sons, or two of Vic Arena's sons, I should be clear, Andrew and John. And John was a made guy, Andrew was not. And these guys wanted to do a book. And I said, this sounds interesting. And we did some work and knocking around. And then the publisher was like, I just don't see it, you know? So
Right.
it happens, right?
Mhm.
So a couple years go by, and this guy at the publishing house is getting ready to retire. And he called me up and he's like, I'd really like to do one more book with you. And I said, well, why don't you reread that Orena proposal that I sent along? I still think it's good.
Right.
And he got back to me and he's like, yeah, let's do it. So it was just a bit of good fortune, because I always thought it was a good story. It's really the last of those wars, and the cast of characters,
Oh, amazing
from
character.
Scarpa to Vecchio, you go down the list, right?
Now, when you talk about that, because I really want to get into the Scarpa, because that whole FBI, scandal there kind of reminds me of what happened a little bit up in Boston with Whitey Bulger and John Conley. Like the Vecchio and Scarpa really kind of similar there, don't you think?
Very much the same. Yeah, of course. I mean, I guess the central or connecting theme is, right,
Mhm.
these guys just got away with everything. I mean,
Everything.
Scarpa was involved in 4 shootings during the war, I believe, 4 fatal shootings, to be clear.
Wow.
And then he would, go home where his wife was there, and just back to like a regular, I don't know, day at work. He didn't really work, but I mean, he certainly wasn't a guy who had much remorse for anything, if anything.
Well, his nickname was the Grim Reaper, so that should tell you everything.
Right.
Yeah, you should get some cards made just in case you're not sure. Grim Reaper. Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's start before we get into Scarpa in detail. Let's start with little Vic Arena. Let's talk about him. Start at the beginning with him and his background.
Yeah, Vic Orena is a guy who he's a grandson of immigrants. His family settled uh, in Brooklyn, but in an area of Brooklyn at that time was kind of like farmland, if you can imagine such a thing,
Right.
And he really had a very tight connection with his father. And when he was 4 years old, his father passed away, and this changed a lot of things in his life. They wound up leaving this kind of bucolic area and moving into the busier sections of Brooklyn. He becomes a bit of a truant at school and a troublemaker. He's involved in an incident where a friend of his is riding a trolley car and falls off and is killed. And he eventually is sent to basically like juvenile lockup because of his behavior. He's a truant, he's a troublemaker, he's involved in the death of his friend, and so away he goes. He comes out after 4 years. Now he's 16, and when he gets home, there's what's an immediate problem for him. His mother is dating this gangster out in Brooklyn, and Vic hears that the mother is getting beat up by this guy, and so he decides he's gonna go find this guy. So he gets one of those, I guess they were in vogue back then, like a handheld one-shot pistol. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, and he goes out. He goes out looking for this guy. So he tracks him down on the street, fires a shot, clips the guy on the ear, doesn't really get him, and then he just starts beating the guy. Now this is like a 16-year-old kid beating this, man-sized mobster.
Wow.
Right.
And by the way, I was trying to think of zip gun before. That's what he used to. Zip gun, yeah, oldie but goodie.
Yeah.
So obviously this this is major faux pas, right? You're beating up a made guy on the street.
Sure.
Who are you? You know what I mean? And he gets dragged in to meet with the local elders in Brooklyn, in a mob social club. And rather than berating the guy, although I think he gets some strong words read to him,
Mhm.
they develop a fondness quickly for this guy. You know what I mean? He's like,
Sure. You see something
yeah,
in him.
yeah, whatever he has, right? These guys can see it,
Mhm.
and so he gets in that way with the local crime family, and then he goes on from there. You know what I mean? He was always a moneymaker, good earner, both legitimate money and illegitimate money. Uh, he had two sons who followed him into the family, Vic Jr. and Johnny. Um, he became a made guy, I believe, in 1973. At this point, uh, Carmine Persico stood
Right.
up for Vic's induction, which, of course, looking back, you know, these things happen, I guess. And so everything is going according to plan. He's a big earner for the family. He's well liked within the family. He has a crew that he runs. He leaves Brooklyn, moves into a house out on Long Island. Um, yeah, and life is good. Life is good for the Orena family.
Talk to me, Larry, talk to me real quick about Carmine the Snake Persico, who of course is the boss of the Columbo family.
Yeah, well, he didn't get the nickname by accident, right?
Oh, oh,
Yeah. Uh, I mean, he was, well, I mean, look, he was obviously a pretty good boss, you know what I mean? I think what annoyed a lot of guys of his age back then was he sort of enjoyed the limelight, which is not the way the head
oh,
of a family should be running things, right?
sure.
Right.
Um, he almost did that 60 Minutes appearance. And it's funny, you can go back and, everything's online now, but, they have video footage of the guy waiting to interview him and he's kind of wandering around. It's kind of crazy that he even thought about it. You know what I mean? And then of course the next thing for Carmine was he represents himself at trial, and
Right, sure. Yeah.
and that's crazy. I mean, the transcripts, it's astounding. You know what I mean? And by all accounts, he did pretty well. You know what I mean? Uh, but of course, he didn't win, and that was well, it wasn't it was the end of his outside of prison career.
Right.
Um, he still had his hand on the rudder from behind bars, but then problems within the family, who's going to be running things on the street, that type of thing crop up, and that kind of leads directly to the war.
We will be right back. That's Enough Out of You is sponsored by Case Quattro Winery, featuring over 20 flavors of wine, from dry red, dry white, and fruit for your sampling pleasure. Case Quattro Winery offers entertainment, parties, and private events. Check out our full menu with a little something for everyone, including appetizers, salads, dinners, pizza, and desserts. Case Quattro has some of the best live entertainment in the area, with comedy nights and karaoke night and live bands. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram for all of our upcoming events. If you mention the code OUTA, that's OUTTA, you get 15% off your order. Located at 1542 Main Street in Peckville, call 570-382-3855 for more information. And we thank Case Quattro Winery for their support.
And this would be actually the third war in the Columbos, correct?
Yeah, that's right. There was
Joey Gallo.
I was going to say the Gallows were in one in the 50s, right?
Right.
And then I believe they were involved in a second one as
And the
well.
second one, right? And Carmine, isn't that how he got the names the Snake? Because he changed sides during the Columbo Gala War. Joe Columbo.
Yeah, he was. That's correct. Yeah. No surprise there.
Right.
And then the last war, of course, was this war. I mean, they yeah, I mean, they weren't the most powerful of families, but they seemed to be like the peskiest of families,
Right, sure.
and also the most inclined to resolve things in a manner that would not work well for anyone involved,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Joe Columbo gets shot, and he was lingering in a coma for a while, right? So when is
7 years.
7 years, right? And Persico is
Yeah.
actually the acting boss for a while, right? When was he officially? Do you know when he was officially named boss?
I'm looking here, but I mean, by
By 75, maybe?
73, by
73.
73, he's already inducting Vic. So,
Okay.
I don't know if he was the boss then, but 73, 74, 75, somewhere in that time range, I would think.
Okay. So when he goes to jail, this is when the whole thing starts because he kind of picks Vic as the acting boss, but he always had the intention of putting his son in there, correct? But his son was in prison, so Vic never got the okay to be the official boss, which he was trying to look for. And Vic had the backing of John Gotti, correct? Because John Gotti hated the Snake and he liked little Vic.
Yeah, let me start with
Okay.
when Vic took over.
Okay.
I should add, when he took over, Persico had been behind bars for 4 years, I believe.
Okay.
And he had already whacked the guy who was Little Vic's predecessor, a guy who had been chosen as acting boss. He's taken on a car ride out to New Jersey. He pulls into his garage and he gets shot up and left for dead. So that's how that change of regime comes. It took 2 years for Persico to decide that he had made a mistake there. And so then they go to Orena, who I think by all accounts is pretty much considered, a hail fellow, well met by most of the people involved.
Right. Sure.
And yeah, little Alley Boy is going to be getting out, I guess, in 95 at that point. So it's a few years off.
That's Persico's son, the Snake's son.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. And so that's kind of hanging over everything. And Vic has this position, but he knows it's not a permanent position, and he'd like to make it a permanent position.
Right.
So this becomes a bone of contention between the two families, and there are guys that were loyal to Vic who went to the other side. Carmine Sessa, probably
Yeah.
most notable. Sessa was one of the guys on the hit team that was sent out to kill Vic. And it's funny, even after the attempted murder, according to the Orena brothers, like the Orenas got together with the Persicos and they were trying to work things out that, like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
And and they just couldn't find a common ground, I guess, or and so this friendship between two families, both in organized crime and outside of organized crime, very close together.
Right.
The sons of each had businesses together. They would go to barbecues at each other's house. I mean, they were very close, and this just kind of blew everything up. And from the Orena point of view, as voiced to me, is that, like, nobody was saying Vic was going to be president for life, or but he felt that he was not entitled, I shouldn't say that. He felt he had earned the position as acting boss at that point.
Right.
And he wanted to be just named the boss, not
Right.
for 100 years, you know,
Mhm.
probably not long after Little Alley Boy comes out, but he thought that he should have had that title.
Right.
Yeah.
And didn't they tell him that he had to go, he had to get didn't the commission say that he had to get the capos to vote on it, and then somebody turned on him, and that pretty much how the war started, because that got back to the
Well,
snake?
there was that did happen, and that was Carmine Sessa who
That's it,
went
right,
back with
okay.
yeah.
So he turned on him.
So yeah, and he's one of the guys in the car for the failed hit when they go after Arena the first time.
Wow.
And it's funny. I was talking to Andrew Arena at some point uh, during the research for the book, and he brings up Sessa, and I'm like kind of you hear all these names and everything, and you're taking notes, and you're kind of half paying attention. And when Sessa's name came up, Andrew Arena goes, "He used to drive around in my father's boat, for God's sake."
But that's what these guys, that's what they do, right, Larry? I mean, they're best friends one day, and then the next day they're killing each other.
Seems
It's
like it's
well,
always
that
the best
yeah,
friend killing you.
yeah, and I mean, this was a different case because really you had Scarpa, who defined so much of the warfare. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, both during the war and after the war. Although he didn't last long once the war ended.
Well, let's talk about Scarpa. Let's get into detail about his relationship with the FBI, his handler DeVecchio, and I want to get into a lot of the things, because it seems like the FBI used him, Larry, to help their fight against the Ku Klux Klan, and had Scarpa doing a lot of illegal things, but it was kind of going after the Klan, correct?
Yeah, that's the movie Mississippi Burning,
Right.
right? Alec
Mhm.
Baldwin, I believe, is in it.
And
That's the story. That's the story of what happened
right,
when
William
he was
Dafoe, I think,
recruited.
too.
When Scarpa was recruited. Yeah, was recruited to go down there, and he went down the first time. Um, this is a long time ago. These names might not mean a lot to people, but
Well, it was
there
the
were
Civil
three.
Rights Act, right? Three civil rights activists went missing.
Yeah, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney were the
Right.
three names, and the first two came down from New York, and the other one was a local guy, and they get kidnapped, brutalized, and just disappear. So the FBI in New York reaches out to Greg Scarpa, and he goes down there, and he's I don't mean to laugh, but I mean he's not like knocking on doors and asking questions, like some cop from Mississippi. You know what I mean? He's down there to find out what happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he does. You know what I mean? That's the incredible part. He's able to find this guy who he beats the shit out of. You know what I mean? Uh, Maybe I shouldn't have sworn there, but
That's fine.
that's okay.
okay. And and then this guy gives up where they are, and they find all the bodies. And there was then another case where a black guy was burned out of his house. I think his daughter was in the house when it was set afire, and they couldn't get a break in that case. And similarly went back. I think his girlfriend Linda Shiro went with him, and he goes out and he basically tortures this guy until he gives up the information that he's looking for, and he gets paid in cash by the FBI and returns to New York. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if you saw a movie that contained this in it, you'd
You
be
wouldn't
very
believe it.
skeptical, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
that's crazy.
But
And
the
of course,
thing is now, if you go into the FBI documents, there's just reams and reams of paperwork about this stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
For me, it's like going in a rabbit hole. I go in there, and I could stay for like 2 hours, 3 hours just looking at this stuff. You know?
So how much did DeVecchio know of what Scarpa was actually doing and the methods he was using? Or how much do we know he knew?
Yeah, I mean, DeVecchio's version of Scarpa was that he's become an agent working up in New York, and he's looking to recruit some informants. And he comes across Scarpa's name, and I think Scarpa had been an informant until 5 years before, when he and his handler had broken things off, and so DeVecchio decides he's going to go over and see if he can bring this guy into the fold. And he waits for him outside the house, uh, and they have a little back and forth, and they sort of agree to agree. And as time goes on, uh, he becomes the handler of Greg Scarpa. And I mean, obviously, all the way through the war.
Mm-hmm.
And we would like to thank our sponsor, Gracious Day Grains. Sean, you like to eat healthy, don't you?
Always, buddy. I try to eat healthy as much as I can.
Yeah, and there is nothing healthier than what they call like farm to table, right? So when you can get something right from the ground and make it and then put it right on your table. And Gracious Day Grains, they have a tremendous selection, and it's totally organic. Everything is, they don't use any sort of herbicides or pesticides or anything like that. They have a bunch of different products on their website, Gracious Day Grains. So if you go to graciousdaymilling.com, you'll find a bunch of great stuff there, Sean.
Yeah, you will, Billy. And it's owned by Tom Maxey, who's a great guy from Virginia. He's a truth seeker, just like me and you, buddy. And Tom's growing philosophy follows the wisdom of farmers of centuries past. And a quote from Tom is, "If we practice the right rotations, we exclude the bugs and weeds without needing herbicides or pesticides." So, I mean, this is great, Billy. I mean, what he's doing is fantastic.
There's cornbread mix, there's cornmeal, popcorn he sells, buckwheat Sean, have you had buckwheat pancakes?
No, buddy.
Oh they're delicious. I love buckwheat pancakes. And Gracious Day Grains sells buckwheat pancakes. Just go to their website and you'll be able to find all of this stuff there. You can order it right off the website. You can find out all about how they farm and their whole philosophy, Tom's philosophy. It's great stuff.
It really is, Billy. And one of the things he does is he grinds small batches at very low temperatures, which retains the flavor and the freshness.
Of course. And it can't get any fresher than that. I mean, it's literally right from the ground. So again, go to graciousdaymilling.com and just, take a look on there. You can order whatever you want and they'll send it right to your door. Again, it doesn't get any fresher than that, right from Tom's farm to your door to your table. So
absolutely. And eat healthy and you'll feel better.
Absolutely. I wish I could do that. I wish I could eat healthier, Sean.
We'll start with Tom's stuff, buddy.
I'm going to order some of those buckwheat pancakes. I love
There you go. I'm going to try them too, Billy.
Yeah, they're really good. All right. Gracious Day. We thank Gracious Day Grains for their sponsorship.
Thank you.
Now, Larry, the final episode of The Sopranos, when they have the war between New York and Jersey, that's kind of based on this Columbo War, correct?
Yeah, I think so. You know what I mean? It's
very similar.
Very much so. You know what I mean? But again, like so much of this, and I think that's what makes it so interesting, was very cinematic. You know what I mean? The stuff going on in the streets, the stuff going on behind the scenes. The Orenas and the Persicos, who were once super tight, now leading these two warring factions on the streets. There's just a lot of stuff that it pulled me in as somebody looking to write a story, and I think people hear this stuff and I mean, it's the last real mob war too, which I think is something. You know what I mean? And
Right, sure.
yeah, I think that sort of illustrates that, you're really not going to see the likes of a lot of these guys anymore. It's a different
No,
world.
different
Yeah.
world. So, Larry, talk about what ends up happening with uh Scarpa and Delvecchio, because Delvecchio ends up facing charges, right? Murder charges.
Yeah, that was that was a good one. I should add here um, that I got a hold of DeVecchio, which I didn't know if he would want to speak or not.
Right.
Um, and so I called up this FBI PR guy who referred me to. There's a website where you can reach out to old FBI agents, and I just put in like a request for anybody who was involved in the Orena Persico war. And I heard from one guy who was involved in the arrest of Carmine Sessa on the steps of St. Patrick's Cathedral, right? And I think one of the Persicos was arrested there too. And I was like, this is great. I mean, you throw out a line, you get this. And then like 2 days later, I get a email from Lynn DeVecchio saying, call me up. I'd love to speak to you about all this.
Wow.
Yeah, it was good because it gave you a little counterpoint. I mean, believe me, he is unapologetic about everything and anything.
Right. Kind of like John
Yeah,
Conley,
no,
Boston.
yeah, I guess, although I think the difference was like when he went to court in New York, like dozens of FBI agents came in to support DeVecchio. Like he had people who really believed in him, as opposed to Conley, who I think once he was exposed was pretty much considered like,
Yeah. Everybody backed
and
off him.
Yeah.
yeah, pick your words. But DeVecchio had a lot of supporters, and look, he I spoke with him at length at one point, and then I called him back another time just to do some fact checking. And he does not give an inch. He
Wow.
insists that yeah. I mean, he would just like some of the stuff that came out at the trial, which of course fell apart when they got there. Um, he was just dismissive of that. Like, who would believe this stuff? Kinda, you know what I mean? Uh, and he was a guy that had a really good reputation. Um, when he got up to New York, that's like kind of moving into the big leagues, right?
Right.
Um, I mean, he's got a lot of good stories. He was he was telling me one time about him and his partner went over uh, to Gigante's uh, hangout. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
it's like one of these things where he's acting kind of normal, and then he sees these guys, and he goes into the whole act and everything. And it's yeah, he's a guy with good stories. You know what I mean? He's been around a lot. He's seen a lot. And again, not not giving an inch on any of this. I think he said after the acquittal, right? Where not the acquittal, after the case was tossed, he did say, where do I go to get my reputation back, right?
Right. Yeah.
I should add too that he went to dinner that night, just as an aside, at Spark Steakhouse.
Wow.
Little mob trivia there.
Ironic, huh? Uh, so what's your, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, Larry, but what's your own feelings on DeVecchio? Do you feel like what do you think? Do you think he just got caught up in it and he was trying to do the right thing and he used the wrong methods, or what do you think?
I think it's possible.
Okay.
I will say that in talking to him, he's I mean, I would say this. First of all, I don't think a lot of guys in that position would talk to you, especially on like, a cold email like that.
Right.
Right.
Um, and he was happy to answer every question, um, give his side of the story. Um, he and in the end he walks now on a bit of a technicality still, but he's never convicted of anything. Even in the probe that the feds did before the trial, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. So, I can't say who's right or who's wrong. I can just say that he was unmoving in his self-defense. Very much so.
Wow. I want to talk about some of these other characters that were in there. Let's talk a little bit about Gotti. So Gotti was really back in Orena because he hated the snake, correct? But he also wanted to position
Yes,
the commission. He wanted to position another ally with him on the commission.
Yeah, bring him. Excuse me. Let me go back to the beginning. Gotti bringing Vic along, right, gave him another vote on all sorts of things. Now, at that point, I think there were only 4 families, right? I
Yeah,
believe
because
the Bonanos
Bonanno,
were
they
still,
kicked
yeah,
Bonanno's off, yeah.
right, exactly.
But he
So
had problems.
if you
He
had
had problems with Gigante, so there was issues there with those two.
yeah, I mean, I don't think Gotti wanted any part of Chingiganti. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I mean, those two had a meeting at a apartment. I think it was in Greenwich Village to discuss something, and Gotti was telling the Chin how his son had become a made guy, and Gigante's response was, "Oh, that's too bad," you know, like you're bringing your son into this life. Although he later did the same thing himself, Gigante. So,
Right.
uh, you know, everybody's got a good line,
Sure.
Yeah.
And do you want to say anything to kind of wrap the war up before we get into some of these other characters?
Yeah, I mean, the war. I mean, like so many of these wars, is just absolutely pointless.
Sure.
Um, I mean, it really destroyed the Orena family. Their father and 2 of the sons wound up doing prison time. Uh, all the money that had been amassed um, just disappears. So now you got the wife at home with 2 younger kids and Andrew uh, to try and run anything. And I think there was always some hope. I'm pretty sure from speaking to the Arenas that Vic might get a compassionate release. They were filing papers as recently as late December,
Right.
and it just, well, I mean, it never happened. Never say never, but I can't see it happening at this point. You know what I mean? So
Larry, can you tell us a little bit about you mentioned the botched hit on Orena. Can you describe that a little bit? What actually happened there?
oh yeah, sure. I think it's in July. It's a summer night anyway, out on Long Island, and Orena, I believe, had dinner at Tommy O'Sara's club out there, and he's driving back to his house, and he looks and he sees a car. It's in a suburban neighborhood. He sees a car that doesn't look right to him, and then he recognizes, I think it was Carmine Sessa inside the car, and so he slams on the gas, tears out of there, and he's gone before these guys have any chance to get a shot at him. And he does end up going back to his house, and they assemble the next day, I believe, the leadership of the family and his sons who are involved. Andrew Orena was there as well, and I think their feeling was at that point that, you know, okay, this happened, but it doesn't have to mean that there will be a war. And and when you look back, I mean, it was, I guess, 6 months, 5, 6 months until the next shooting. Um, so there was a time in there, and the thing that the thing that's really kind of stupid about it all is these families knew each other, you know, socially and business wise. There was no reason to go out and start shooting and killing, you know, uh, because it's like the most self-destructive decision you can make, right?
Sure, absolutely.
You know, and yeah, but then, like I said, things were quiet um, until they tried to whack not Carmine Persico, excuse me. Oh, why am I blanking?
Was it Scarpa? They went after Scarpa?
Yes, yes. They waited outside Scarpa's house and tried to
Right.
kill him there. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so, you know, that's obviously the crossing of the Rubicon, right? Uh,
Sure.
you know, you go to what's the old? I think it was a line from The Wire. You know, you come at the king, you best not miss, right? And
Sure.
you know, and I mean, a motivated Scarpa is even scarier than the regular Scarpa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and he assembled a good group of guys who were with him, um, and they were active, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And of course, depending on what you want to believe, one of the reasons they were active is because they knew where their victims were going to be in advance, right? And they could figure out how they were going to get in and get out.
Mhm.
Um, and of course, that became a whole big thing with DeVecchio. Uh, you know, I mean, look, the DeVecchio stuff led to two huge trial acquittals for the Orena faction. Um, the second one uh, involved two of Vic's sons. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
and they beat the rap on that one. I mean, it's you know the idea of beating one federal charge, you know, gangsters against the government, it ain't happening. Uh,
No.
and Billy Catolo and his group were acquitted right before Christmas. And then the next trial came, and all those guys were acquitted too. It's really astounding. I think it's probably unprecedented. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, One of the things interesting, Larry, talk to me about Joe Columbo's son. He believed his dad was killed by the FBI's COINTELPRO operation, correct? Because we covered COINTELPRO, you know, which was actually an FBI operation against the civil rights movement. But
Right.
son believed that it was involved in the assassination of his father, right?
Yeah, 100%. He did an interview with I think it was the New Yorker where he
Mhm.
talked about this, and according to his version of what happened was that the FBI approaches his dad, and they basically say to him, uh, "If you're willing to just step down and walk away, you're all good with us. We're not going to
Wow.
go after you anymore. We'll never arrest you anymore, but you got to walk away." And the old man says, "Not interested." You know, and then we all know what happens at the big Italian American rally
Rights League,
in
yeah.
Midtown Manhattan. Yeah, you know,
Yeah.
um, and he was convinced, Chris, that this was the case. You know what I mean? He said he spent a lot of time researching it, and yeah, he was pretty adamant. I mean, it was in the middle of a long piece, and it was kind of like, wow, dead serious. I mean, the Arenas tried to do a little bit of that in their case. Their lawyers argued that Scarpa and DeVecchio had fomented the whole war, and they were responsible for that. And whether you believe it or not, it didn't work as far as getting him out of jail. You know?
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of these other colorful characters in the Columbo family. What do you know about Hugh Apples McIntosh and Sonny and Michael Franzese?
All right. I think McIntosh. Let me see if I can find. I had a little note to myself here.
Was he heavily involved in the war, or was he already in prison?
No, he was before the war.
Okay.
He
He was
was
close with the Snake, though. He was really close with Carmen the Snake.
very close with Carmine Persico. he was a bodyguard and kind of a loyal henchman type of guy.
Right.
But he also spent a lot of time behind bars.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of those guys did, you know.
Sure.
Of course, he never got made because he was an Irishman.
Right.
The same complaint I have, you know.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
Um,
They're always in there,
you
though.
know, and yeah, exactly. And he McIntosh, I believe, was originally aligned with the Gallows, and he wound up flipping over to the Profaci side, as they would have called it back then. So yeah, that's basically what I would know about him. He spent a lot of time in jail. You know what I mean?
What about Sonny and Michael Franzese? Were they weren't involved in this war, were they?
No, no, no. Sonny, I
was
think,
out
was
in
probably in prison. He was
Yeah.
probably in prison at that point. Yeah. And I think, trying to think
Michael
when
would have just
Michael.
been coming up, right? He would have just been.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I spoke with him at length when I was doing the book, and yeah, he had sort of. I mean, look, he did. I was gonna say he found religion. He literally found religion, right?
Mhm.
After he got out of the mob, and you know, his take on the war was basically too like that. You know, nothing good was going to come of it.
No.
And you know, and now you look at him, he's like a social media star, right?
Yeah.
Videos all over the place.
A lot of
Got
these
his
guys
own
are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sammy the Bull's
podcasters,
got
they're
a
all
phone.
Sammy the Bull is a big
Even
time
Skinny
podcast.
Joey Merlino has a podcast, or he did. I don't know if he's still going.
I'll say this: Sammy Gravano, another guy who helped me with this book. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, he testified. Uh, he testified in the Vic case, and it's just funny. Like, you know, these are guys who I read about it and wrote about it, and you know, now you can send them a text,
Right.
and they get back to you. Know, it's somewhat disconcerting, but on the other hand, it's just such a huge help. You know.
Sure.
Yeah.
What did Sammy testify about? He testified against Vic?
Yes, yeah, about the Osera murder.
Okay.
I think his version was that he had heard, you know, that John and Vic had spoken about this and it was going to happen. So, yeah, that's kind of the short version of that.
We will be right back. DK's Corner, now located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, is serving up the area's best tasting food at respectable prices. Known for our great cheesesteaks, DK's also has delicious breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and catering 7 days a week. You'll love the wraps, soups, and pizza too. We're now open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit DK's Corner on Facebook to see our daily specials, and make sure to follow and like us while you're there. We offer local delivery to homes and businesses, takeout, or come and dine in our new restaurant in Jessup. Call or text DK's Corner at 570-209-0278 or hit us up on DoorDash. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You.
Let's talk about another Irishman, Larry. Jimmy Burke. Jimmy
Oh
Burke.
God, yeah.
Look, he was close with Little Vic.
Yeah, even though they were not in the same crime families.
No, he was in Lucchese.
Yeah, exactly. And the Orena brothers were big fans of Jimmy Burke's.
Mhm.
He used to come by the house to see the father or just to pop in. And, you know, there was, I'll just give you one of the stories that they told me. There was an argument between John Orena and a neighbor across the street. This is around Christmas time, you know.
Mhm.
And actually, it's Joan. It's the wife and a neighbor.
Right.
And so she's in the house, and Jimmy comes by, and she tells him what happened, and he just walks across the street, just takes down all their Christmas lights and smashes them. Just bing, 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 smashing them all. You know what I mean? Yeah, there was another night where he took, I think, the two older Orena brothers to some strip club. You know, they're like 8 and 10 or something, and he brings them in there. There's like women dancing in cages and everything. They're looking at each other like, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" You know what I mean? And there was one other good one. Um, hmm. Well, go ahead. I'll think of it. I'll think of it.
They also knew Tommy DeSimone, right? Because of course Jimmy Burke and Tommy DeSimone were played in Goodfellas by De Niro and Pesci, so
Yes.
famously.
Now you've jogged my memory. Tommy
Okay.
DeSimone is driving through the Arena's neighborhood when he sees a forlorn Andrew Orena sitting on the porch, and he says to him, "What's wrong?" And apparently, they didn't have ice cream trucks in Brooklyn in like the 50s and 60s. They had pretzel trucks. Are you guys? I never heard of this before.
No, I just remember
So,
in the book seeing it.
yeah, so he explains to he explains to him that this guy just drove by without giving me any pretzels, and he climbs into the car, throws it into drive, cuts off the truck, gets out, grabs like 2 bags of pretzels, and delivers them back to Andrew. Just another day in the life, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
so what did they say about the DeSimone murder? Because there's so many different versions. There's even a version that Jimmy Burke was behind it. But Vic actually was offered a contract on Jimmy Burke. Is that correct?
I think it was as it was presented was that Gotti reached out to Vic to put this in motion.
Wow.
Um,
That's
although
interesting.
there's
I thought Gotti and Jimmy Burke were very close because they were on the Kennedy Airport. There were a lot of the hijacking. They were
right,
sharing.
right. Yeah. Um, yeah, but I haven't seen his name mentioned in that. Uh, yeah.
So what happened with Vic with this contract offer? It never came about, obviously.
The contract to kill
To
Osera?
kill Jimmy Burke. No, to kill Jimmy Burke.
Oh, Jimmy Burke. Yeah. No, that he didn't want to do it, but obviously that it had to be done, it would be done. But as it worked out, it never had to happen. That's correct. Yeah.
So you think somebody called it out? Because at this point, that would have been what? That would have been in the 70s, or that would have been in the 80s. That would have been Gotti wouldn't have been boss yet, though. So that would have had to come from above him, correct?
Yeah. When did Gotti took over in '85, right?
85, yeah. So wasn't this
Yeah.
before? Because Burke was in prison, right? Burke went to
Burke was also in prison, yeah, although I don't know exactly when. But
Well, he died in prison, right?
Burke did in like
yeah,
96.
Yeah.
he did die in prison, yeah.
So if if they reached out to Vic, this probably would have had to be Castellano would have had to order that, and
It might have been even before that.
so it would have been maybe Gambino,
Gambino.
Carlo Gambino.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know Carlo Gambino was involved in turning on a lot of people, so it's possible. But then it's just interesting because somebody somewhere had to call that off on Jimmy Burke. It had to be somebody at a high level. It had to be one of the other bosses, maybe all of them.
Yeah. I always thought Burke had a little bit of an edge because he was a real money earner. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He wasn't a guy who got in trouble or got arrested. Well, I mean, they all get arrested, don't get me wrong, but yeah, he was just a guy who did the job.
Right.
And he made his higher ups a lot of money.
Right. And that's what kind of made him untouchable. That's why I was kind of surprised when I seen this in the book that they're actually thinking about whacking him, but somebody had to call this off. It had to probably be
Yeah,
the other
yeah.
bosses, I would assume.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yep.
And then another interesting thing in the book, 'cause this book is really fantastic, and we have it, by the way, up on our bookshop. Larry, I put out 3 of your books on there. People could get. And one of the really interesting things, I think was it one of Vic's sons that said they seen a FBI informant list, and that Castellano and Neely Della
Oh,
Croce
God.
are on that list. Is that correct?
Yes. You're making me laugh. I'll just tell you the story because it's funny.
Okay.
Andrew Orena dug up this paperwork, um, which I later saw, and it was all kind of legit. And not kind of legit, it all looked very legit. So I'm on vacation down the Jersey Shore. And so Andrew calls me, I'm on vacation. So he calls another guy in my office and tells him this whole thing, sends over the court paperwork. You know, this guy's a rat. This guy's a rat. And every name you're like, what, rat, what? And so I have no idea what's going on in New York. I get up the next day, I go to the Wawa to get the paper, and it's on the front page of the paper. You know, I think there's a big picture and of a rat, like, you know, rats. So I'm like, wow, that didn't take long. And I come back in the house and the phone ringing, and it's one of the defense lawyers that I know. Can I swear here?
Of course.
Can I?
You could.
He just starts motherfucking me. It's like 7:30 in the morning. You know what I mean? I'm disgusted that you would be a part of this. And I haven't really read the paper yet, so I'm not sure exactly what he's yelling about. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that one, yeah, I mean, the guy that did the work on it, you know, I saw the paperwork after I got screamed at. You know, and it wasn't like, well, if you twist it this way or twist it that way, you know, I thought it was all pretty straightforward. But yeah, there were 2 lawyers for Persico. I got berated by both of them. Yeah,
So
that was
do we really think
quite a day.
that's legitimate, Larry? Because I mean, when I think of Neely Della Croce,
That's hard to believe. He's as old school as you can get.
Old school, yeah, really. Like, it's hard to believe that he would be an informant.
Well, it's funny. I was looking around for stuff before I talked to you guys, and there was a thing that suggested that he was working, a story online that I found. Although there was some debate about whether he was actually doing that or he was just playing the part so he could get more information about what the feds were doing, like double crossing. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. So, but who knows anymore? You know what I mean? There was a time, you know, in our lifetimes where none of these guys would rat. You know what I mean? And
I don't know.
Yeah.
you know, at the end of the war in '93, they're falling all over each other to be the first person into the courthouse. You know?
Yeah.
And so let's talk about, like, in '85 with the commission. That's the commission case when they put him on trial. Persico's already in prison, right? And they had Castellano was whacked. So it was only, I believe, Tony Ducks Corallo was on trial, and I think Fat Tony Salerno, correct? And Salerno was
That's correct. Yeah.
We know now that he was probably most likely the front boss to Gigante.
Yes. That's a guy that's dedicated to the family, right? He's going to take a 100-year sentence for a rap that really belonged on somebody else. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
But yeah, I went back and looked at like the Persico transcripts from when he represented himself, and I know this will sound crazy, but he at least in reading it, it sounds like he was doing a really good job. You know what I mean?
Good job, yeah.
Yeah, he's very cogent, and you know, he's very deferential to the witnesses. You know, nothing at all like you would think of him. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just I mean, that's kind of the fun part of something like this is you get to go back in history and come across something like that. You know what I mean? That you never expected you would see. And of course, now if you look hard enough, you can find almost anything online, which is great. It's great if you're a writer, anyway.
Yeah. That's surprising. I mean, they usually say any man who represents himself as a fool for a client, right? But I guess that in that case it wasn't.
Yeah, you go tell him that.
Well, it didn't work though.
No, it didn't.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think those guys knew they had a losing hand from the get-go. So,
Sure.
why pay a lawyer?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
True.
So when this war ends in like 93, that pretty much, do you think that pretty much ended the Columbo crime family as as the power they once were? And what's the state of the Columbos today?
I don't even know if there is a Columbus today. I'm sure there's somebody who's the head of the family, but I mean that let's not forget that in '95, that's when the younger one comes in to take over for the dad.
Right.
So that he managed to dodge, right? He
Right.
managed to dodge a couple of prosecutions before he finally got nailed. So I mean, there was still something, but there was nothing like it once was. You know what I mean? I mean, you just think of like Manhattan, construction, the garment center, go down the list of this, that, and the other thing. You know what I mean? Uh, and yeah, so when Alley Boy Persico comes out of prison, you're now you're the king of what? You know what I mean? The government is going to be after you, which they were until they finally convicted him. Um, you know, uh, the money can't possibly be what it was because they can't operate on that kind of an epic scale. I mean, every building that used concrete in the 1980s, kicking back 2% or whatever it was. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Yep.
That's. I mean, we all lived through it, but it's hard to imagine anything like that happening now, isn't it? And that
Right.
was business as usual.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Sean and I always talk about that scene again in The Sopranos where they try to they go into the coffee shop and they they try to get protection
Down,
money.
they're shaking it down.
and the guy says, look, every single bean in this place is accounted for. There's nothing I can do.
Doesn't one of them say this is the rape of our culture?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
says,
yes,
they walk out. You walk out of there. He says, well, that's it for the little guy.
Oh man.
But Larry, and again, we've done a lot of these episodes, on these mafia guys, and we always say, we're not trying to make these guys look like heroes in any sense. I mean, most of them are just they're murderers, they're thieves, they're criminals, and we kind of and no one knows this, I'm sure, better than you do.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of we've been told a lot of times that what is it, Sean, that we
glorified them, but we really
glorify
don't.
yeah.
You got to admit they're interesting. I mean, whether you like it or not, they're
right,
fast.
exactly, and that's why we talk about it. But it's certainly not to glorify these guys.
Yeah, for sure. I should add, I had a little note here to myself that I forgot to mention, which I should, which is,
Okay.
The Arenas have fought all along, right? Get the dad out. And they went before Jack Weinstein in 1997 to make the federal judge, Jack Weinstein, to make their case. And it's the same story. Do you believe the Arenas or what? And Weinstein comes out in his ruling and he says, it is bizarre, but not entirely implausible. And then he sends him back to jail. I apropos of nothing, I just always liked that story. So I figured I'd throw that in there.
That's great. You know what, Larry, we could talk to you probably all day. I'm sure. But we want to be respectful of your time. We're certainly going to have you back. I hope. We've got so many other.
Yeah, Larry, I'd like to have you back if you want to discuss your other books, Gigante, and especially the one on the Philly,
Sure.
Ralph Natale, because that's always been fascinating to us because we're pretty close. We're only like 2 hours from Philly, so
Yeah.
with all that stuff. So that'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, I went. I would drive down to see him like once a week for as long as we were doing this, and it was like it's like some old world house. Like I would come in, it'd be him and his wife. They lived with their daughter, and we would sit down, and she would come out with like plates of prosciutto and tomatoes, and it was unbelievable. It was like a mob movie almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, that book didn't do great, but I had a very good time doing it. You know what I mean? He's passed away now, but he was
Right.
very, very interesting. He had a lot of stories, which a lot of people, like after the book came out, like, I don't think that ever happened. I'm like, why would the guy make this stuff up? You know what I mean?
Right.
You know,
Right.
and in the end, he became an informant,
Him and the foreman.
and
Yeah.
and he testified against Joey Merlino, who was not convicted.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's
So,
crazy.
you know,
And wasn't he
yeah,
at the,
that is
I believe Natalie was the highest ranking member ever to testify at that time, I believe, right?
what I wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. You know,
Was he, I don't know if you want to answer this, but was he the boss or was he another front boss? Because I've heard both.
he claimed that he was the boss. Now, I don't know, I'm not as well versed in the Philly mob as I am in the New York mob, but he was insistent that he was 3 years. Is that how long he stayed in charge
Something like that.
before
Yeah.
things went sideways?
And of course,
He
that
had some
ties
young
into the war
girlfriend too,
down
right?
there. What's that?
He had some young hot girlfriend at the time too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Secchia, is that her last name? I don't know. It all runs together.
I forget, but see, because that'll tie into, of course, with Molino, you had the war with John Stanfa
Right.
and that mess right after,
Yeah.
little Scarfo went to prison.
Yeah. Yeah. Philly's a strange place.
Yeah.
In many ways.
Well, yeah. But, who's the boss? Who's this? Who's that? Like, can't we all just relax and make some money here? But it's never like that, is it?
Well,
No.
the smart bosses always use front bosses, though. I mean, you see that, you even seen that in the movies, in the Sopranos. You see that with Tony using Uncle Junior.
Right.
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 And you see
Yeah,
that,
well, that's
you see that with, Tony Accardo using front bosses for
Yeah.
years.
yeah. Gigante. He's another guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Using
know?
Fat Tony Salerno, but Salerno, Larry. Then we'll let you go after this. But Salerno had a lot of power, though. Do you think at one time Salerno actually was the real boss, and he became
That's a
front
good
boss
question.
later? Because that's the way I kind of look at it. Because Salerno was making a ton of money. He was really powerful and well respected.
Yeah. Well, and he's sort of off the grid at that club he ran
Right.
up in Harlem.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Which I always thought was great because it was so anti-Gotti. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
the way a real guy does
Right.
things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With a cigar in his hand in an unventilated room at 115th Street. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was something else.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, all right, Larry, thank you. This was great.
Yeah.
We kept you here a little over an hour here, but it was fantastic. Is there anything you want to say to wrap it up?
I just thank you too. I really appreciate the time and the help and the invitation. And yeah, I was a little nervous, but it went okay, I thought.
Oh, you did great.
Oh,
And
this
we'll
was
post-
great.
We'll post links to your book. And I recommend the book to everybody. I read it, and it's really fascinating read.
Yeah. Little Vic and the Great Mafia War is the title.
Yeah, it's I mean it's always good when you can talk to people who were there, you know what I mean? And the two sons couldn't have been nicer. I drive out to visit them. They live on Long Island. We'd be having like coffee and scones,
Wow.
which I thought was kind of crazy. But they were really helpful. And Andrew Orena spent a lot of time and is still spending time trying to get his father out. And but everything happened so fast once they started arresting him. Gotti goes down, and then Vic goes down, and
Right.
all of a sudden the war is slowing down, and then Man, we didn't even get into that story about Scarpa getting shot in the eye and then driving himself to a hospital. Did you ever hear that one?
Oh yeah, do you want to tell that real quick, Larry? Because that's fascinating.
Yeah, there were some guys outside. I'm sorry. There were some guys outside Greg Scarpa Sr.'s home.
Hmm.
And so he gets into, I guess you'd say, a verbal argument with him, which escalates quickly. And the next thing you know, they're shooting at each other. One of the guys shoots him through the eye, Persico, through the eye. And Persico, not Persico, right? Shoots Scarpa directly through the eye, and he he doesn't like dial 911 or bang on the neighbor's door. He gets a bottle of scotch, takes a huge slug off the bottle of scotch, puts some sort of bandage over the eye that the bullet just shot out, and drives 20 miles to a hospital in New Jersey. But the thing I always liked about it, which is never really, does he think that just because he's a hospital in New Jersey, they're going to treat him like a regular customer when he comes in with a big hole where his eye used to be?
Oh,
but yeah,
that's crazy.
that was sort of the thing that led then to, hey, why is this guy still out there? We're going to take another look. And he died very quickly after that. The AIDS really caught up with him and beat him down in a hurry.
Right.
Once he got locked up in the hospital.
Wow. Crazy story.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, fellas, thank you so
All right,
much
Larry.
again. I
Thank you.
appreciate
This
it.
is fantastic.
All right.
My next goal is to try and get this video to work on my end.
Yeah, definitely for next time.
Yeah, all right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Hey, buddy.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Larry.
Take care.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.